What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I want to talk to you about an overlooked nuclear war target. And before I get into this, I want to just mention that on my website, I have a list of all nuclear war targets in the United States, Canada, and Europe. And I'm currently working on targets in Russia. So to go to my website, you just type in www.NYPrepper.com. And when you get to my website, you're going to want to click on prepping references and articles. And I have a lot of good reference information here, not just for nuclear war, but other things as well. I have best bug out locations in America, but here I have my nuclear war targets in Europe, nuclear war targets in Canada. And if you scroll down, you'll see major nuclear war targets in America. Do you live near one? So you definitely want to check out my website. And I have a list of all the major targets in every state. Okay. So these are not all of the targets in the United States. These are the primary targets. Okay. There are secondary and tertiary targets that I don't list because the list would be so massive and it would take me forever to figure out all the secondary and tertiary targets for every single state. I just don't have the time to do that. At the very minimum, you should be aware of the major nuclear war targets in the United States and also in your state and neighboring states, okay? And I've talked about these targets in my How to Survive Nuclear War series. So, one thing that I don't have listed here, but I do mention, and this is an overlooked nuclear war target, and this is airports with long runways, okay? So, if you live near an airport with a long runway of 2 miles or more, or about 10,000 feet, that airport could possibly be targeted by Russia in a nuclear war, okay? And the reason why is we have strategic bombers that deliver nuclear weapons, okay? Our primary strategic bomber is the B-2 Spirit, which is going to be replaced soon by the B-21 Raider. But we also have the B-52 Stratofortress and the B-1 Lancer, okay? So we have three strategic bombers that are capable of delivering air-launched cruise missiles with 100-kiloton warheads. And the B-2s can also deliver gravity bombs. Specifically, they can carry the B-83 gravity bomb, which is a 1.2 megaton gravity bomb. And the B-2, because it's a stealth bomber, it can penetrate Russian airspace and drop this 1 megaton bomb right on top of a target. So our strategic bombers would need to disperse in the event of a nuclear war. And the reason why they would need to disperse is so they don't get destroyed, okay? So as soon as our military gets the alert from NORAD that Russia has launched ICBMs and they're coming towards the United States, the pilots of these B-2s, B-1s, and B-52s will literally have 15 to 30 minutes max to get into their planes and get into the sky and find an alternate airport to land at, okay, while the president decides what attack option he wants to carry out with his nuclear football, okay? So airports with long runways, 2 miles or longer, or 10,000 feet or longer, would be used for dispersing bombers to land. Okay. These bombers are going to eventually have to land at some point. And because Russia knows where the home bases are or the home runways are of all of our stealth bombers and our B-52s and B-1 Lancers, they're going to target those bases like Whiteman Air Base, Barksdale Air Base, Ellsworth Air Base, Dice Air Base, just to name a few. all of those bases are going to be targeted. So these bombers are going to have to get up into the air and either carry out some kind of attack option, or if they're not involved in any kind of attack option, they're going to have to eventually land somewhere. Okay. At the bare minimum, they're going to have to disperse from their home base. They can't just sit at their home base because that home base is a target. So they have to be able to disperse and go to other airports where Russia is not going to target them, and they can safely land and stay at those airports temporarily during the nuclear war. Okay. So let me just give you an example of a runway that would possibly be targeted. This is a B 52 Stratofortress. These bombers are not stealthy, but they can carry up to 20 air launched cruise missiles, the AGM 86 and the AGM 129. They can carry 20 air launched cruise missiles with an operating range of 2,000 miles. And each one of those cruise missiles can carry a warhead of 100 kilotons, and they can hit targets with precision. So these bombers would basically fly probably halfway across the Pacific and maybe halfway across the Atlantic and release their payloads, the air launched cruise missiles. And then they would turn around and come back to the United States. And when they turn around and come back, they need a place to land. And if when they turn around and come back, their home base is leveled by a Russian nuke, they need alternate bases to land at, okay? Or even if they're not involved in any kind of nuclear strike, they still have to be able to disperse, okay? So this is a B 52. Here we have a B 1 Lancer. This is a semi stealthy, supersonic strategic bomber, and it's no longer in production, but we still have a lot of them. These can also carry a lot of air launched cruise missiles, and they can also carry gravity bombs. And then we have the famous B 2 Spirit. Okay, this is a stealth bomber, the only one of its kind in the world, and it can penetrate enemy airspace and deliver nuclear ordnance on top of targets. Now, these planes are extremely heavy. They are absolutely massive. The pictures don't do justice. And because they're so heavy and because they have to fly pretty fast, they need a very long runway to land and also to take off. So they need at least a 2 mile long runway or about 10,000 foot runway. So what that means is most international airports in the United States would likely be targeted. Here we have JFK International Airport. And if I measure the distance of the main runway at JFK, it's 2.68 miles. So JFK could possibly be targeted. So if you live near JFK Airport, just be aware that Russia's probably going to nuke this airport in a full-scale nuclear exchange, okay, a full-scale nuclear war. Now, what makes airports a dangerous target if you live near an airport like this is that Russia would have to use a ground burst warhead in order to sufficiently damage the runway. Because even if they were to, let's say, damage the control tower and support structures, it's not enough. They have to damage the runway so the bombers can't land on them, okay? So they would have to use ground burst nuclear warheads that would land basically right on the runway or very close to it to sufficiently destroy the runway and make it unusable. So most international airports in the United States would be a target. So what I recommend you guys do is go onto Google Earth and check if there's any airports within 50 to 100 miles of your location where you live, where you work, or anywhere you spend a lot of time. Check and see if there's any airports that have runways of 2 miles or longer, or about 10,000 feet or longer, because those runways could be used by our strategic nuclear bombers to disperse and to land at after launching strikes on Russia or other countries. So just wanted to mention that because I didn't really talk about it much in my other nuclear war survival videos. I talk about all of the traditional nuclear war targets, but this is a target that a lot of people overlook. Okay, so most international airports are going to have long runways. Most of the major Air Force bases that don't even carry any strategic bombers or any kind of attack aircraft are going to have long runways. And sometimes you'll even have smaller airports that have long runways for various reasons. So you need to go onto Google Earth and check all the airports within 50 to 100 miles of your location or an area where you spend a lot of time at. Because if you're right next to an airport that has a long runway and it gets hit by a ground burst nuclear warhead, it's going to be very hard for you to survive because you're going to be very close to the blast wave and the heat. Okay. Also, you might be downwind from fallout as well, depending on the location of the airport. And that's something you need to also look into. You need to figure out, are you downwind of this airport? Are you upwind? If you're downwind, what times of the year are you downwind? Because you have different prevailing winds for different times of the year. So, like here in Pennsylvania, in the cooler months, let's say from October until May, the prevailing winds are usually from the northwest. Unless there's some kind of unusual warm front, we get winds from the southwest, but 70% of the time they're from the northwest. So if I have an airport that's, let's say, 20 miles northwest of me and it has a 2 mile long runway, I know that there's a good chance the fallout is going to blow towards me. Okay. So figure out the prevailing winds in your part of the country and how they change throughout the year. Figure out if there's any long runways near you. And that's pretty much it for this one. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, and persevere.